Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Today we're going to do another episode of the Memory Lane series, the place where we take a look back at some interesting articles and interviews from old guitar magazines. So my dad has been subscribed to Guitar World magazine for about 30 years now. He saved a bunch of old magazines. He was kind enough to let me borrow some. So the one we're going to look at this time is the March 2000 issue of Guitar World magazine. Here's the cover. Most of the time, we only discuss one article or one interview during each video. However, I have a treat for you guys today. We're going to switch things up a little bit. Today I'm going to share with you one interview followed by one article. Killed two birds with one stone, because nothing is too good for my viewers. Figured both of them are pretty short, so why not include both of them? The first one is an interview done by Christopher Scapoletti. He talked to Mark Tremonti from Creed. This guy. Nice full shot of him there. He talked to Mark Tremonti from Creed after he was voted the best rock guitarist in the Guitar World Readers Poll from 2000. So let's hear what he has to say first. Here we go. Creed formed in 1995. Less than 2 years later, My Own Prison had gone multi-platinum, and the group had a dedicated fan base. Why do you think your music caught on so quickly? I think because it was the only serious stuff out there at the time. There were no heavy rock bands in the mainstream when our first album came out. It was all pop, and I think we opened the door for a lot of radio stations to change their formats to include heavier stuff. We were the heaviest band when we came out, but today you get even heavier bands like Godsmack. Speaking of Godsmack, the article after this will actually be related to Godsmack, so what a coincidence. Foreshadowing. What are the odds? Plus, I think we filled the void that was created when all the heavy 80s bands fell out of popularity. People still want to hear heavy guitars, and they still want to hear growling vocals instead of a goofy, funny song. They want to hear something serious. The songs on My Own Prison were written very early in Creed's development. How do you think the songs on Human Clay compare to them? The new album is more representative of us than the first album, in part because Scott and I now aim for the same things in our songs. What you hear in our music is just a mixture of our styles. His is more influenced by melodic rock like U2 and The Doors, whereas I grew up listening to Metallica, Slayer, heavier stuff like that. But now we've had more time to hone our styles and make them more cohesive. How does the songwriting process work between the two of you? It's different for every song. For instance, we wrote Faceless Man off Human Clay while we were on tour. I was in my hotel room playing my guitar when I wrote a really great guitar line. Suddenly, my phone rang, and it was Scott saying, "Man, I just wrote these awesome lyrics." So he comes to my room and sings them for me. And I'm like, "Dude, I just wrote this guitar line." And the two of them went together perfectly, as if we had written them together. The same thing happened with some of the songs on My Own Prison. How do you think Human Clay compares to My Own Prison in terms of songwriting, performance, and production? I think it's really superior to My Own Prison. Every time a song was mixed for Human Clay, I would sit back and think, I can't believe that we're putting this album together. My Own Prison was great, but we'll go back and listen to it and think, well, we were pretty young and naive, but we put together a pretty good album. On Human Clay, the songwriting has improved a little bit, but the sounds and tones we used, and the recording as well, are just so much better. It kind of stomps My Own Prison. Why do you think that is? Success hasn't affected us like it has most bands. I think success tends to turn bands into happy-go-lucky people. They're not slaving in the pits anymore, and the music loses its edge. But we've just had such a struggle to get over the criticism in the media. Even after the success of My Own Prison, critics were calling us one-hit wonders and saying we were just a trend. They've always underestimated us. which is good because it's kept us going. Okay, we're gonna show these guys. I mean, on the last tour, we'd perform at festivals where they would put us on a side stage, even though we had sold more albums than some of the bands on the main stage. What usually happened is that we would come out to play and all the kids would leave the main stage show and come over to watch us. All the so-called big acts were out there on the main stage wondering where their audience went. And you know, after My Own Prison, we toured for 2 years and we got tighter as a band. We're a tuned machine now, and you can hear it on this album. Human Clay is so much heavier than My Own Prison. What gear did you use on this album? I recorded a lot of it with my 1960 Les Paul, and I also used a lot of Paul Reed Smiths. But this album's heavy sound is completely due to my new rig. I call it my secret weapon. On one channel, I used a Mesa/Boogie triple rectifier with Fender Showman cabinets, each of which has two 15-inch speakers in them. On my other channel, I had a 4x12 Boogie cabinets with a dual rectifier. For my clean sound, I used the dual rectifier and the 4x12 cabinets, but when you kick in the Showmans with the triple rectifier, the sound is awesome. It's just death. What tunings are you using on the new album? I use standard tuning, drop D tuning, and open D tuning. Otherwise, I never tune down. I played guitar for 10 years before I even thought of tuning the guitar differently. But once I figured out drop D tuning, it was like playing a different instrument. On the tour for My Own Prison, I figured out open D tuning, so I used that on a couple of songs on the new album. And I might use it for half of the next record too. You have to keep changing things. I think every time you change your guitar tuning, you create a whole new vibe. You stumble onto new things and get these crazy chords that you probably wouldn't have come up with otherwise. You said you tend to record your guitars dry. Do you ever use effects in your setup? I use a TC Electronic G Force for my cleans, but I'm not very effective friendly. When I buy an effects rack, I just use the presets that came with it. I don't know how to change that stuff. And you probably don't have much time in your schedule to learn how. How do you guys cope with all the pressures of your sudden fame? Whenever we get spare time, we try to spend it with our girlfriends, or at home just relaxing or watching a video. I mean, you get me away from all of this, and I'm the most boring guy in the world. All I do is relax and rent movies every night. Blockbuster gets all my money. Good old Blockbuster. So that's the end of the interview with Mark Tremonti. Let's jump ahead here to this article. Will be about Godsmack's Tony Rombola. Here he is. And he won the award for runner-up Best New Talent from the Guitar World Readers Poll in 2000. This article was written by Richard Beinstock. So let's get started. It's safe to say that when New England's Godsmack released their debut in the summer of 1998, the album didn't exactly take the music world by storm. And just in case the four band members weren't aware of this, it was made crystal clear to them during a performance at Florida radio station WGBX FM's X Fest in March of 1999, when lead singer Sully Erna had to literally fight for his right to sing. While crowd surfing his way toward the stage after one of his ritualistic dives into the audience, Erna found himself being attacked by a security guard who mistook the tattooed frontman for an overzealous fan. In order to affirm his status, the singer held his microphone high above his head. Unfortunately, the guard was still not convinced. Sully was just screaming at him, "I'm the singer! I'm the singer!" recounts guitarist Tony Rombola, but the guard grabbed him and put him in a headlock. Apparently that's when Sully decked the guy. I was playing a lead at the time, so I just saw it out of the corner of my eye, Afterward, I looked up and saw the guard laid out on the ground, being dragged off to the side of the stage. The funny thing is, we didn't even stop the set. Sully kept on singing, just like nothing had happened. But the guard must have realized what a mistake he had made, because he came up to us after the show and apologized. In hindsight, it's great that Rombola can find some humor in the incident. Certainly any painful memories of the episode were eased when a few months after the Florida show, Godsmack's first single, Whatever, went into heavy rotation on both radio and MTV. It's really not hard to understand why kids were quickly attracted to the song's minimalistic thump. While many bands within the new school of metal are content to merge aggression with art, sometimes eschewing rhythm for avant-garde noodling, Godsmack are proud to stand up and declare themselves cavemen, banging out gargantuan power chords underneath blunt declarations like, "I'm doing the best that I can, now go away," from Whatever. Critics most often compare the group to Alice in Chains, but that has more to do with Erna's vocal delivery and the band's moniker, which the group members insist was not lifted from the Alice in Chains song of the same name. In actuality, Godsmack's gritty, stripped-down approach and start-stop riffing bears more than a passing resemblance to another early 90s act, namely Helmet. Actually, both of those groups were a big influence on us, or at least to me, says Rombola, but our style developed out of a gradual process. A lot of our sound was shaped from playing live and evaluating people's reactions to the music. Many of the songs that comprise Godsmack Universal were already being performed live when Rombola, who had been playing in a local New England cover band, joined up with Erna, bassist Robbie Morell, and drummer Tommy Stewart. However, says Rombola, there was also another more melodic side to the band, with songs that had a lot of ringing open chords and things like that. But when we played shows, we started to notice that it was always the heavy stuff that would get the biggest response from the audience. So that's what we concentrated on. And that's how we developed the real basic groove that we have now, which is the guitar and bass playing in unison, locked in with the drums. In an archetypal college town like Boston, this is not exactly a recipe for success. For the most part, alternative rock, ska, and top 40 cover bands are the soundtrack of choice for kids partying away the stresses of the school week. Indeed, aggressive bands like Godsmack are scarce, and incidentally, so are audiences for bands like them. As a result, the band played largely in the surrounding New England area in small fringe towns like Manchester and Salem. Things began to change in 1996 when a $2,500 loan from a friend, the band went into Boston's New Alliance Studios to record a demo. By then, Stewart had left the band, and Erna, a drummer in his pre-Godsmack days, was left to fill his slot. Most people don't realize that Sully was both the singer and drummer during those sessions, says Rombola. I think it wound up having a big influence on the sound, since Sully is also our main songwriter. Most of the songs were built from the drums up. That's what gives them that really percussive, rhythmic feel. So Erna is sort of like the heavy metal Phil Collins? Yeah, right. Except he's still got all his hair. But seriously, that's also had an influence on the way I had to approach my guitar parts. I needed a thick, clean tone that would support the groove, but without muddying up the mix. In order to achieve that sound, Rombola overhauled his setup, retiring his Fenders in favor of a Les Paul Studio he borrowed from a friend, and a pair of Mesa/Boogie dual rectifier amps. That was the rig I used on every song. What I would do is dial up 2 different sounds on the Mesas and record each one twice. Then I would do one more run with the Les Paul through a smaller amp just to get some different frequencies and to fill out the sonic spectrum. Basically, there's about 4 or 5 guitar tracks on each song. The discs that resulted from those sessions all wound up caught the attention of Boston radio station WAAF, which began to play the track Keep Away on a regular basis. Eventually, the album began selling close to 2,000 copies a week, which is when the majors came calling. The disc started showing up on SoundScan, and people at the record labels began asking around, "Who's this band that's selling all of these albums on their own?" says Rombola. Within a week, Sully had 2 or 3 labels calling him at home, and he was all freaked out about how they got his number. He was like, "How did they find me?" After welcoming Stewart back into the fold, the band chose to sign with Republic/Universal Records. Acknowledging that Godsmack was selling more albums independently than many new bands do with major label support, Republic decided not to mess with a proven hit and re-released All Wound Up with new artwork in a new title, Godsmack. The only change that was made was the inclusion of 1 extra song, a new... Now we gotta jump all the way ahead to page 202. Most annoying part of these old magazines. They could easily fit the rest of the article on the next page, but they choose not to. Alright. Track the band had recently recorded for a compilation CD of local Boston talent. That song was Whatever. From the beginning, Republic had taken a very hands-off approach with this band, says Rombola. They trust that we know what we're doing, and that we can do a lot of this on our own. And essentially we have, so they just support us and make sure that people know the record's out there, and that we get out on the road to promote it. It's been a great relationship so far, and hopefully it will continue the same way with the next album. We already have about 6 or 7 new songs written, and we're planning on going into the studio early next year to start recording, most likely with Sully producing again. For now, Godsmack will continue touring. In late 1999, the band headed off to Europe, where they supported Black Sabbath on the European leg of their farewell tour. Although traveling with the Godfathers of Metal might seem like a foolproof endorsement for any band, Godsmack still met their fair share of resistance from audiences. It was weird because after the success we had at home, nobody in Europe knew who we were, says Rombola. We were playing in front of thousands of Sabbath fans, sharing the stage with our idols, and the crowd was just standing there, flipping us off. On the bright side, Erna didn't have to deck any European security guards. Well, that's good news. So that's the end of the article. I hope you guys enjoyed both of those. So that does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.